Welcome. Today we're down in the garden, and the reason being is we're going to grab a couple sweet peppers. Today we're going to be making some sweet pepper rings, and if you've never had them before, they're really delicious. The recipe is very similar to onion rings, but sweet peppers just have a better taste or a different taste than onion rings. So I'm going to grab a couple peppers here. We're going to take them up to the kitchen and we're going to make those sweet pepper rings. So I picked some peppers here that we're going to be using for our sweet pepper rings. These aren't probably ideal for big sweet pepper rings, but they're going to work. And like I said, it's the end of the season, so I don't got a lot to pick from out here, but hey, they're still better than store-bought. So let's head up to the kitchen and we'll start making our sweet pepper rings. Now my garden vegetables are probably as clean can be. I start them from seed. I always choose heirloom type of plants. In my garden, I don't use any pesticides. I don't use any chemicals at all. So these are a lot cleaner than anything you'd ever get at a grocery store, or even a lot of times at a farmer's market or something like that, because I know exactly what they are. But still, I always clean my vegetables, and the way I do it is I first wash them off, I rinse them off, but then I use a vinegar bath. I'll take a container like this, put about 1/3 of a cup of distilled white vinegar in it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to soak my peppers just for a few minutes, just to make sure I get anything off that I may have missed. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to come back and we're going to slice them up and prepare our sweet pepper rings. So the way I usually cut my sweet pepper rings, and a lot of times these peppers are end of season, so they're not as big as I want, but what I do is cut the top off, and then I'll go ahead and cut the bottom off and kind of push out the seeds, see if I can get them out without making much of a mess. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And if there's any white spots or anything like that inside, you can go ahead and use your knife to cut that out. That's pretty much it. So then what you got is your pepper, and you're going to just cut rings out of that. And I make them about, I don't know, 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch or so. It just depends. So once we've cut our pepper rings, we're going to go ahead to the next step. So if you watch my fried squash video, you're going to see we're going to use kind of the same method again to make our sweet pepper rings. And what I call it is the shake and bake method minus the bake, where we're going to use a Ziploc bag and we're just going to put all the dry ingredients in here, mix them up, and then we're going to just shake it and get these things coated. So first thing you want to do is add about 1 cup of all-purpose flour. And then I add a tablespoon of baking powder. A teaspoon of salt. And about 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. And then the last ingredient that I use anyway is 1/3 of a cup of cornstarch. And that's really an essential ingredient to this recipe. Cornstarch, if you've ever had crispy things like French fries and other things, it's that cornstarch that really makes it crispy. So we want our sweet pepper rings to have a bit of a crispiness to them when we deep fry them. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'll put 1/3 of a cup of cornstarch in there, and we're going to mix that all together. Now the one thing I left out that a lot of people will use, especially for onion rings, there aren't that many recipes out there for sweet pepper rings, is they add either sugar, or in their wet mix they're going to add beer or something else like that to give it that sweet taste. I don't drink alcohol, so I don't have any beer in the house, and I'm not going to add sugar because to me, I honestly think I like the flavor of them without the sugar, but I'll just say sugar is optional. So if you want to add sugar at this point, you want to add about 1 tablespoon of sugar. So that's all I added, just to update. That's all I added. So what we're going to do is close that Ziploc bag up, and we're just going to mix those dry ingredients together. So once those dry ingredients are mixed together in our Ziploc bag, all we're going to do now is add our sweet pepper rings, and we're just going to drop them in here. I made pretty many this time. I'm not sure if I'll be able to fit them all in. We'll see what happens here. And after we do this, I'll explain why we do it this way. Looks like they're going to fit. So once they're all in there, you just want to close up your Ziploc bag, and then all you want to do is kind of shake it up. And what you're going to see is how that dry mix, it'll start sticking to our pepper rings. And that's important because once we put it into the wet mix that we're going to be preparing here in a second, that if you don't have that on here, it just doesn't cause that wet mix to stick as well as we want. So you can see how our dry mix of flour and everything else is really sticking to those peppers. So looks like they're mixed pretty well here. So what I do now is I'm going to let this sit for about 15-20 minutes. That'll help it to really set, and then we're going to start preparing our wet ingredients. Before we prepare our wet ingredients, we want to make sure our skillet's ready to go. So if you look over on the stove, I got a cast iron skillet ready to go. I put the oil of my preference in, and everybody has their own preference for the type of oil they want to use, but go ahead and put in a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, probably closer to 1/4 inch of oil. Let that start to heat up over medium heat, and that should be ready by the time we do this. So to prepare our wet ingredients, first you just take 2 eggs, just beat them up. And to that you're going to add about 1.5 cups of either milk or buttermilk. I like buttermilk. You don't have to use buttermilk. You can use milk if you want. I think buttermilk adds a little bit more flavor, and you're going to find some things online about how to make buttermilk if you don't have it. But I'm just going to add 1.5 cups of buttermilk. Give that a quick mix. Now the next step is we've let the sweet pepper rings, they've been sitting in our flour batter for about, I don't know, 20 minutes or so. And so what we want to do now is just take them out. We're going to put them on this plate and just kind of shake them off as we pull them off, and you'll see why here in a second. But you can see how just by sitting in that flour mix for a bit of time, it kind of helps to hold that flour onto them, and that's going to help because we're going to be putting them in this mix here in a second. And just by having that flour on that ahead of time, it makes it stick just a little bit better. So let me just go ahead and pull the rest of these off. Now you can see how we still got the flour mix left after we pull off our sweet pepper rings. We're just going to dump that right into our wet mix. And then just give that a quick mix. Because what we're going to do then is as we put them into the hot oil over there, we're just going to dip them in here, and that'll add that extra flavor and batter that kind of makes them really stand out. So that's it. So we'll go over and check our oil, see if it's ready to go, and we'll start frying them up. So the way I test my oil, if it's hot enough, I'll just take a little bit of the batter and just drop it in here. See if it bubbles up. And you can see how that bubbled up right away. That might actually be a little bit warmer than what I want. So let me turn it down a little bit, but it should be good to go. So then what I do is just start taking my peppers, and I'm just going to drop them in my my batter and let them get soaked a little bit. And I use my fingers, but you can see how they fry up right away. Now you can see, if anything, my oil is a little bit too hot here, so let me just flip them over. And we'll give them a second, and then we're gonna go ahead and add some more. So as they're cooking, you can go ahead and just put some more peppers in there. So once they get that golden brown color, you can go ahead and pull them out. They look like they're done. And then we're going to drop in the rest. So you just drop them into the batter and just kind of make sure they're covered and kind of drip them off so they don't get too much. You can see they get kind of golden brown, and then once they get to that point, just give them a flip. That guy there's kind of big. I think I left him a little bit too big, but you know, it is what it is. So we let the sweet pepper rings cool off a little bit. So I got a little blue cheese dressing here. I want to try one. So let me just go ahead and grab one here and see how it is. You know, I gotta say, I actually kind of prefer this over onion rings. So great recipe if you got peppers out there you want to make, or even if you make onion rings for people and you want to have an alternative, sweet pepper rings are absolutely delicious. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please go ahead and like it. If you want to see more recipes like this, please go ahead and subscribe. And I look forward to seeing you next time.